My mom called me a Jezebel for getting pregnant by mistake. I'm Sarah, 23 years old, and I was standing in her kitchen when she said it. The word hit me like a slap. I didn't even know what a Jezebel was until that moment, but the way she spat it out told me everything I needed to know. I grabbed my purse and walked out. Didn't say a word. Just left. The drive back to my apartment was a blur. My hands were shaking so hard I had to pull over twice. I sat in a grocery store parking lot and cried until my eyes were swollen shut. Then I drove home, went inside, and locked the door behind me. That was 3 months ago. I haven't spoken to my mother since. She's called 17 times. I counted. I never picked up. My dad called too, trying to play peacemaker like he always does, but I told him I needed space. He understood. Or at least he pretended to. The thing is, my mom wasn't always like this. Growing up, she was the fun parent. She was the one who let me stay up late on school nights to watch movies. She was the one who defended me when my teacher said I was too chatty in class. She was my person. But then my older sister Emily got married 5 years ago, and something shifted. Emily married a youth pastor named David, and suddenly my mom found religion in a way she never had before. She started going to church 3 times a week. She stopped watching the TV shows we used to love together because they were too sinful. She threw out half her wardrobe and replaced it with long skirts and high-necked blouses. I thought it was just a phase. It wasn't. When I told her I was pregnant, I thought she'd be upset. I thought she'd be disappointed. I even thought she might yell at me, but I never expected the look of pure disgust on her face, like I was something dirty she'd stepped in. The father is my boyfriend Jake. We've been together for 2 years. He's a bartender, which my mom has never approved of. She thinks he's irresponsible. She thinks he's leading me down the wrong path. She's told me at least a dozen times that I could do better. Jake was the one who held me when I came home that day. He didn't say anything. He just held me while I cried. And when I was done crying, he made me soup and put on a stupid comedy show and sat with me until I fell asleep. I decided right then that I was done trying to win my mom's approval. I was going to have this baby, and I was going to do it without her. But then something happened that changed everything. 2 weeks after the fight, my sister Emily showed up at my apartment. I almost didn't open the door. Emily and I used to be close, but ever since she married David, she's become an extension of my mother. They talk every single day. They go shopping together. They pray together. It's like watching someone get absorbed into a cult. But I opened the door anyway. Emily looked nervous. She kept fidgeting with her wedding ring, twisting it around and around her finger. She asked if she could come in. I said yes, but I didn't offer her anything to drink. I wanted her to know she wasn't welcome. She sat on my couch and stared at her hands for a long time. Then she said something that made my blood run cold. She said, "Mom wasn't always like this." I told her I knew that. She shook her head. "No, Sarah, you don't understand. She wasn't always like this because something happened to her." I sat down across from her. My heart was pounding. Emily took a deep breath, and then she told me a story I'd never heard before. When my mom was 19, she got pregnant. It was before she met my dad. The guy who got her pregnant was her high school boyfriend, and when she told him, he disappeared. Just vanished. Never spoke to her again. My mom's parents were religious. Really religious? When they found out she was pregnant, they kicked her out of the house, called her a whore, told her she was going to hell. She had nowhere to go, so she moved in with a friend and got a job at a diner to support herself. She ended up having a miscarriage at 5 months. Emily said it nearly destroyed her. She fell into a deep depression, and it took her years to recover. I sat there stunned. I'd never known any of this. My mom never talked about her past. I always assumed she'd had a normal, happy childhood. Emily said that when my mom met my dad a few years later, she was a different person. She was fun and carefree because she'd decided to leave all that pain behind her. But when Emily got married and started going to church, something shifted. My mom started going with her, and all those old wounds came back. Emily said that when I told my mom I was pregnant, it was like she was looking at her 19-year-old self, and she couldn't handle it. I didn't know what to say. Part of me felt sorry for my mom, but a bigger part of me was angry. Her trauma didn't give her the right to hurt me. Emily left after that. She hugged me at the door and told me she loved me, but I could barely feel it. I was numb. Jake came home from work and found me sitting on the couch staring at nothing. I told him everything Emily had said. He listened quietly, and when I was done, he said, "That explains a lot, but it doesn't excuse anything." He was right. It didn't. I thought that would be the end of it. I thought I'd process what Emily told me and move on with my life. But then, a month later, my dad called. He sounded strange on the phone. His voice was shaky, and he kept pausing like he was trying to find the right words. Finally, he just asked if he could come over. I said yes. When he arrived, he looked like he'd aged 10 years. His face was pale, and there were dark circles under his eyes. He sat down at my kitchen table and put his head in his hands. I asked him what was wrong. He said, "Your mother's in the hospital." My stomach dropped. I asked him what happened. He said she'd had a breakdown, a complete mental collapse. She'd been found in her car in the church parking lot, screaming and crying. Someone called an ambulance, and they took her to the psychiatric ward. I felt like I couldn't breathe. I asked him when it happened. He said 2 days ago. I was furious. I asked him why he hadn't called me sooner. He said my mom made him promise not to. She didn't want me to know. She didn't want me to see her like that. But he couldn't keep that promise anymore. He said she was asking for me. I didn't know what to do. Part of me wanted to go to her, but another part of me was still so angry. I told my dad I needed time to think. He nodded. He looked defeated. He said to take all the time I needed, but he hoped I'd come soon. After he left, I sat on the couch with Jake and cried. I cried for my mom. I cried for myself. I cried for the baby growing inside me who would be born into this mess. Jake said he'd support whatever decision I made. If I wanted to go see her, he'd come with me. If I didn't want to go, that was okay too. I decided to sleep on it, but I couldn't sleep. I lay awake all night thinking about everything. I thought about the mom I'd had growing up, the one who made me feel safe and loved. I thought about the mom who'd called me a Jezebel, who'd looked at me with disgust. I thought about the 19-year-old girl who'd been kicked out by her own parents and lost her baby. By the time the sun came up, I'd made my decision. I went to the hospital. The psychiatric ward was nothing like I'd imagined. It was quiet and sterile, with pale blue walls and fluorescent lights that hummed overhead. A nurse led me down a long hallway to my mom's room. She was sitting on the bed, staring out the window. She looked small, fragile. When she turned and saw me, her face crumpled. She started crying immediately. She said my name over and over like a prayer. I sat down in the chair next to her bed, and I didn't say anything. I just let her cry. When she finally stopped, she looked at me with red, swollen eyes and said, "I'm so sorry." I nodded. I still didn't say anything. She said she knew she'd hurt me. She said she knew what she'd said was unforgivable, but she wanted me to understand why. I told her Emily had already explained it to me. She looked surprised. Then she looked ashamed. She said, "I never wanted you to know about that part of my life." I was so ashamed. I asked her why she took it out on me. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "Because when I looked at you, I saw myself. And I hated myself." That hit me harder than I expected. I felt tears welling up in my eyes, but I blinked them back. I told her that I understood she'd been hurt. I told her I was sorry for what she'd gone through, but I also told her that she had hurt me, and I didn't know if I could forgive her yet. She nodded. She said she understood. We sat in silence for a while. Then she asked if she could touch my stomach. I hesitated, but then I said yes. She placed her hand gently on my belly, and for the first time in months, she smiled. It was a small, sad smile, but it was real. She said, I want to be a grandmother to this baby. I want to do better. I told her I wanted that too. But I said it was going to take time. She said she had all the time in the world. I left the hospital feeling lighter than I had in weeks. I didn't know if things would ever be the same between us, but I felt like maybe, just maybe, we could find a way forward. Jake was waiting for me in the parking lot. He asked how it went. I told him it was a start. We drove home, and for the first time since this whole thing began, I felt hopeful, but then 2 weeks later, something happened that shattered that hope completely. I was at work when I got a call from Emily. She sounded panicked. She said I needed to come to my parents' house right away. I asked what was wrong, but she wouldn't tell me. She just kept saying I needed to come now. I left work immediately. Jake met me there. When I walked into my parents' house, I found my mom, my dad, Emily, and David all sitting in the living room. My mom's face was pale. My dad looked furious. Emily was crying. I asked what was going on. My dad stood up and said, "Tell her." My mom looked at me, and I saw pure terror in her eyes. David cleared his throat and said, "There's something you need to know about your family." I felt my chest tighten. I asked what he was talking about. He said that a few weeks ago, my mom had confessed something to him during a counseling session, something she'd been hiding for years. I looked at my mom. She wouldn't meet my eyes. David said, "Your mother didn't have a miscarriage when she was 19. She gave the baby up for adoption." The room went silent. I stared at my mom, waiting for her to deny it, but she didn't. She just sat there, tears streaming down her face. I asked if it was true. She nodded. I felt like the ground had disappeared beneath me. I had a sibling out there somewhere. A sibling I'd never known about. I asked why she never told us. She said she was ashamed. She said she'd spent her entire life trying to forget about it. And when Emily got married and she started going to church, all that guilt came flooding back. She said she thought if she became religious enough, devoted enough, she could somehow make up for giving her baby away, but it didn't work. The guilt only grew worse. I asked if she'd ever tried to find the baby. She shook her head. She said she was too afraid. I looked at Emily. She was still crying. I asked if she'd known. She said she'd only found out that day when David told her. My dad was pacing back and forth, his hands clenched into fists. He said he'd known about the pregnancy, but my mom had always told him it ended in a miscarriage. He'd had no idea she'd lied to him for over 30 years. The betrayal in his voice was heartbreaking. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know what to feel. I was angry, confused, hurt. I felt like my entire life had been built on a lie. I looked at my mom and asked, "Was it a boy or a girl?" She whispered, "A boy." I had a brother. Somewhere out there, I had a brother who had no idea we existed. I asked if she knew anything about him, where he'd gone, who adopted him. She said she didn't. It was a closed adoption. She'd signed away all her rights and never looked back. I stood up. I needed to leave. I couldn't be in that room anymore. Jake followed me out to the car. I was shaking. I couldn't stop shaking. He asked if I was okay. I said no. We drove home in silence. When we got back to the apartment, I went straight to bed and pulled the covers over my head. I didn't want to think. I didn't want to feel. I just wanted to disappear. But I couldn't stop thinking about my brother. What was his name? What did he look like? Did he have a good life? Was he happy? Did he ever wonder about us? Over the next few days, I couldn't let it go. I kept thinking about him. I kept imagining what it would be like to meet him. Finally, I made a decision. I was going to find him. I told Jake, and he said he'd help. We started researching how to find someone who'd been adopted. It was harder than I thought. Closed adoptions meant that records were sealed, and there was no easy way to access them, but I wasn't going to give up. I reached out to my mom and asked if she remembered the name of the adoption agency. She said she did. She gave me the name, and I started making calls. It took weeks of phone calls, emails, and paperwork. I had to prove that I was a biological relative. I had to fill out forms and wait for approvals. It was exhausting and frustrating, but I kept going. Then, finally, I got a call back. The woman on the phone said they'd located my brother. His name was Michael. He was 35 years old, married with 2 kids, and he lived in Oregon. She said she'd reached out to him, and he was interested in meeting me. I couldn't believe it. After all that time, all that searching, I was actually going to meet my brother. We arranged to meet at a coffee shop halfway between our cities. Jake came with me for support. The drive felt like it took forever. My heart was pounding the entire time. When we walked into the coffee shop, I saw him immediately. He was sitting at a table by the window, and the resemblance was unmistakable. He had my mom's eyes and my dad's jawline. He looked like us. He stood up when he saw me, and we just stared at each other for a moment. Then he smiled, and I felt tears spill down my cheeks. We sat down and talked for hours. He told me about his life. He'd been adopted by a wonderful couple who'd loved him and given him every opportunity. He'd always known he was adopted, and he'd always been curious about his birth family, but he'd never had the courage to search. When the adoption agency reached out to him, he said it felt like fate. I told him about our family. I told him about our mom and what she'd been through. I told him about Emily and my dad. I told him about the baby I was carrying. He said he'd always wanted siblings. He said he was glad I'd found him. By the end of the conversation, we exchanged phone numbers and made plans to stay in touch. He said he wanted to meet the rest of the family, but he understood if our mom wasn't ready. I said I'd talk to her. When I got home, I called my mom. I told her I'd found Michael. I told her he wanted to meet her. She was silent for a long time. Then she started crying. She said she didn't deserve to meet him after what she'd done. I told her that wasn't her decision to make. Michael wanted to meet her, and she owed it to him to at least try. She agreed. We arranged a meeting at my parents' house a few weeks later. Michael drove down with his wife and kids. I was so nervous I could barely breathe. When Michael walked through the door, my mom froze. She stared at him like she was seeing a ghost. Then she walked over to him, and without saying a word, she wrapped her arms around him and sobbed. Michael hugged her back. He said, "It's okay. I'm not angry. I just wanted to meet you." My mom couldn't stop apologizing. She kept saying she was sorry over and over. Michael kept telling her it was okay. Emily was crying. My dad was crying. Even Jake was tearing up. It was messy and emotional and complicated, but it was also beautiful. We spent the rest of the day getting to know each other. Michael's kids played with Emily's kids. His wife and Jake hit it off. My dad and Michael talked about sports and work. My mom just sat next to Michael holding his hand like she was afraid he'd disappear if she let go. By the end of the day, it felt like he'd always been part of the family. As I watched everyone together, I put my hand on my stomach and felt the baby kick. I realized that this baby was going to be born into a family that was far from perfect. A family that had secrets and pain and brokenness, but it was also a family that was trying. A family that was healing, and maybe that was enough. A few months later, I gave birth to a healthy baby girl. We named her Grace. My mom was there in the delivery room. She held my hand through every contraction. And when Grace was finally born, she was the first one to hold her after Jake and me. She looked down at Grace with tears in her eyes and whispered, "I promise I'll do better this time." And I believed her. Michael came to visit a week after Grace was born. He brought gifts and balloons and took about 100 photos. He said he was honored to be an uncle. Emily came too, with David and their kids. We all crowded into my small apartment, passing Grace around and laughing and eating takeout. It wasn't perfect. There were still awkward moments. There were still unspoken tensions. My relationship with my mom was still fragile, and I knew it would take years to fully heal, but we were trying. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like we were going to be okay. A few months after that, I got a text from my mom. It was a photo of her and Michael at the park with Grace. The caption caption said, teaching her to swing. Love you. I stared at that photo for a long time. My mom, the woman who'd called me a Jezebel, was now a grandmother to my daughter and had reconnected with the son she'd given up over 30 years ago. Life was strange, painful, complicated, but it was also full of second chances. I texted her back. Love you too, Mom. And I meant it. Grace is 2 years old now. She's wild and loud and full of energy. She has my eyes and Jake's smile. My mom watches her every Tuesday while Jake and I are at work. She sings to her and reads to her and spoils her rotten. Emily's kids and Michael's kids are thick as thieves. They have sleepovers and birthday parties and treat each other like they've been family forever. My dad finally forgave my mom for lying to him all those years. It took time, but they went to counseling together and they're in a better place now. Jake and I got married last summer. It was a small ceremony in my parents' backyard. Michael walked me down the aisle alongside my dad. My mom cried through the entire thing. And me? I'm still figuring things out. I'm still healing from everything that happened. There are days when I'm angry at my mom for what she said to me. There are days when I'm sad about the time we lost. But there are also days when I look at Grace playing with her grandmother and I feel grateful. Grateful that we found our way back to each other. Grateful that Michael found us. Grateful that my daughter will grow up surrounded by love, even if that love is messy and imperfect. Last week, my mom pulled me aside after dinner. She said she wanted to tell me something. She said that the day I told her I was pregnant, she wasn't seeing me. She was seeing herself at 19. Scared, alone, judged. She said she projected all her shame and pain onto me, and she would regret it for the rest of her life. But she also said that losing me, even temporarily, forced her to confront everything she'd been running from. It forced her to face her past and deal with her trauma. And ultimately, it led her back to Michael. She said, "You saved me, Sarah. You and Grace saved me." I hugged her, and we both cried. I don't know if I fully forgive her yet. Forgiveness is a process, and I'm still working through it. But I do know that I love her, and I know that she's trying. Sometimes I think about that day in her kitchen when she called me a Jezebel. It feels like a lifetime ago, like it happened to a different person. In a way, it did, because I'm not that scared, hurt girl anymore. I'm a mother, a wife, a sister to a brother I never knew I had. I'm stronger than I thought I was. And my mom, she's not the woman who called me that name anymore either. She's flawed, she's broken, but she's also healing. We all are. Yesterday, Grace said her first full sentence. She pointed at my mom and said, "I love Grandma." My mom burst into tears and scooped her up, spinning her around the room. I watched them together, and I thought about how close we came to losing this, how close I came to cutting my mom out of my life forever. I'm glad I didn't, because as complicated and painful as this journey has been, I wouldn't change it. My family is messy. We're broken in places. We carry scars that will never fully heal, but we're here. We're together, and that's what matters. Tonight, after everyone left, I sat on the couch with Jake and Grace. Grace was asleep on my chest, her tiny hand curled around my finger. Jake asked me if I was happy. I thought about it for a moment. I thought about everything we'd been through. The pain, the betrayal, the healing. Then I looked down at Grace and said, "Yes, I'm happy." And I was. Michael called this morning. He said he's planning a family reunion next summer. He wants everyone to come to Oregon. He wants our kids to grow up knowing each other. I said we'd be there. My mom called an hour later. She said she couldn't stop thinking about the reunion. She said she never imagined she'd get to have this. A family that knows her truth and loves her anyway. I told her that's what family does. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Thank you for not giving up on me." I said, "Thank you for not giving up on yourself." After we hung up, I sat in the quiet of my apartment and thought about the word Jezebel. I looked it up that day in my mom's kitchen, and I learned it was a biblical name. A queen who was vilified and condemned. My mom used it as a weapon. She used it to hurt me. But I don't think about it that way anymore, because words only have the power we give them. And I refuse to let that word define me. I'm not a Jezebel. I'm not a mistake. I'm not something to be ashamed of. I'm Sarah. I'm a mother. I'm a daughter. I'm a sister. I'm a wife. I'm a woman who survived, who fought back, who found her way through the darkness. And so did my mom. We're both still healing. We're both still learning, but we're doing it together. And that's enough. Grace just woke up from her nap. She's calling for me, her voice bright and happy. I pick her up and hold her close. She smells like baby shampoo and innocence. I whisper in her ear, "You are loved. You are wanted. You are enough." I wish someone had said those words to my mom when she was 19. I wish she'd said them to herself, but she's saying them now, to Grace, to me, to Michael. It's never too late to heal. It's never too late to change. My phone buzzes. It's a group text from Michael. He sent a photo of his kids holding a sign that says, "We love Aunt Sarah and baby Grace." Emily responds with a heart emoji. My dad sends a thumbs up. My mom sends a message that says, "My beautiful family." I smile and add my own message. "Love you all." And I do. This messy, complicated, broken, beautiful family. I love them. All of them. Even the parts that hurt. Especially the parts that hurt. Because those parts taught me who I am. They taught me that I'm stronger than I ever knew. They taught me that love isn't perfect. It's not clean or simple or easy, but it's worth fighting for. Every single time. Grace tugs on my hair, pulling me back to the present. I kiss her forehead and carry her to the window. The sun is setting, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. I think about the future. About the family reunion next summer. About watching Grace grow up surrounded by cousins and aunts and uncles. About the relationship I'm still building with my mom and with Michael. It won't always be easy. There will be hard days. There will be setbacks, but we'll get through them together, because that's what families do. Even the messy ones, especially the messy ones. I look down at Grace, and she looks up at me with those big, trusting eyes, and I make her a promise. I promise that I'll always tell her the truth. I'll never hide who I am or where I came from. I'll teach her about her grandmother's strength, about her Uncle Michael's grace, about her grandfather's patience and her Aunt Emily's loyalty. I'll teach her that people make mistakes, that they carry pain, that they sometimes hurt the people they love, but I'll also teach her that people can change, that they can heal, that they can find their way back to each other. And I'll teach her that she is loved, unconditionally, completely, always, no matter what. Grace giggles and reaches for the window, her small hand pressing against the glass. Jake comes up behind us and wraps his arms around both of us. "What are you thinking about?" he asks. I lean back against him and watch the sun disappear below the horizon. "I'm thinking about how lucky we are," I say. He kisses the top of my head. "Yeah, we are." And in that moment, standing in the fading light with my daughter in my arms and my husband by my side, I realize something. I'm not defined by the worst thing anyone ever said to me. I'm defined by how I chose to move forward. And I chose love. Messy, complicated, imperfect love, but love nonetheless. The kind of love that builds bridges instead of walls. The kind of love that forgives, even when it's hard. The kind of love that says, "You hurt me, but I'm still here." That's the kind of love I want to pass on to Grace. That's the kind of love that saved my family. And that's the kind of love that saved me. My phone buzzes again. It's my mom. "Can I come over tomorrow? I miss my girls." I smile and type back, "Of course. We miss you too. Because we do. And that's the truth. The whole complicated, beautiful truth.